Maryland is one of the most historically significant and geographically diverse states in the United States. Located in the Mid-Atlantic region, Maryland occupies a unique position both politically and culturally. Although it is one of the smaller states in terms of land area, Maryland possesses an extraordinary variety of landscapes, industries, traditions, and communities. Because of this remarkable diversity, the state is often called America in miniature. Within its borders are coastal plains, busy cities, mountain regions, rivers, forests, farmland, and major centers of scientific research and government activity. Maryland's identity has been shaped by centuries of transformation, from indigenous settlements and colonial expansion to industrial growth, technological innovation, and cultural diversity. Maryland is a state in the Mid-Atlantic and southeastern regions of the United States. It borders Virginia to its south, West Virginia to its west, Pennsylvania to its north, and Delaware to its east, as well as with the Atlantic Ocean to its east, and the National Capital and Federal District of Washington, D.C. to the southwest. With a total area of 12,407 square miles, 32,130 square kilometers, Maryland is the ninth smallest state by land area, and its population of 6.1 million ranks it the 19th most populous state and the 5th most densely populated. Maryland's capital city is Annapolis, and the state's most populous city is Baltimore. Maryland is a constituent state of the United States, located on the eastern seaboard. Its northern border with Pennsylvania is the Mason and Dixon line, traditionally regarded as the boundary between the North and the South. Much of its southern border with Virginia is formed by the Potomac River. The District of Columbia lies on the north bank of the Potomac. West Virginia is along Maryland's northwest border. The capital of Maryland is Annapolis. The city is located on the Severn River's mouth at Chesapeake Bay. It became the colonial capital in 1694. Annapolis is home to the United States Naval Academy and the Maryland State House, the oldest state capitol still in legislative use. Maryland is bordered by several major bodies of water. The most salient feature of Maryland's topography is the Chesapeake Bay, which divides the eastern shore from the western shore and covers about 1,840 square miles, 4,770 square km. The Potomac River forms much of the boundary between Maryland and Virginia. Maryland's shorelines consist of salt marshes, or wetlands. Additionally, the state has about 3,200 miles, 5,150 kilometers, of shoreline due to the Chesapeake's estuarine tributaries. Maryland also has a portion of the Atlantic Ocean bordering its eastern side. Maryland's coastline was first explored by Europeans in the 16th century. Prior to that, it was inhabited by several Native American tribes, mostly the Algonquian peoples. One of the original 13 colonies, the charter for the province of Maryland, was petitioned and secured in 1632 by George Calvert, 1st Baron Baltimore, and Cecil Calvert, 2nd Baron Baltimore, and the land first settled in 1634, primarily to provide a religious haven for Catholics persecuted in England. Religious strife was common in Maryland's early years, and Catholics remained a minority, albeit in greater numbers than in any other English colony. Its economy was heavily plantation-based and centered mostly on the cultivation of tobacco. Demand for cheap labor from Maryland colonists led to the importation of numerous indentured servants and enslaved Africans. In 1760, Maryland's current boundaries took form following the settlement of a long-running border dispute with Pennsylvania. Although it was a slave state, Maryland remained in the Union during the American Civil War, and its proximity to Washington, D.C. and Virginia made it a significant strategic location. After the Civil War ended in 1865, Maryland took part in the Industrial Revolution, driven by its seaports, railroad networks, and mass immigration from Europe. Since the 1940s, the state's population has grown rapidly, to approximately 6 million residents, and it is among the most densely populated U.S. states. As of 2015, Maryland had the highest median household income of any state, owing in large part to its proximity to Washington, D.C., and a highly diversified economy spanning manufacturing, retail services, public administration, real estate, higher education, information technology, defense contracting, healthcare, and biotechnology. Maryland is one of the most multicultural states in the country. It is one of the 9 states where non-whites compose a majority of the population, with the 5th highest percentage of African Americans, and high numbers of residents born in Africa, Asia, Central America, and the Caribbean. The state's central role in U.S. history is reflected by its hosting of some of the highest numbers of historic landmarks per capita. The western portion of the state contains stretches of the Appalachian Mountains, the central portion is primarily composed of the Piedmont, and the eastern side of the state makes up a significant portion of the Chesapeake Bay. 16 of Maryland's 23 counties, and the city of Baltimore, border the tidal waters of the Chesapeake Bay estuary and its many tributaries, which combine total more than 4,000 miles of shoreline. Although one of the smallest states in the U.S., it features a variety of climates and topographical features that have earned it the moniker of America in miniature. Maryland's geography, culture, and history are diverse, including elements of the mid-Atlantic, northeastern, and southern regions of the country. The story of Maryland begins long before European settlers arrived in North America. Indigenous peoples lived in the region for thousands of years, building communities along rivers, forests, and coastal areas. Tribes such as the Piscataway, Nanticoke, and Susquehannock relied on agriculture, fishing, hunting, and trade. The Chesapeake Bay served as a central source of food and transportation, connecting communities through networks of waterways. Native societies developed traditions, political structures, and spiritual beliefs closely connected to the natural environment. Although European colonization eventually disrupted these indigenous cultures, their influence remains an important part of Maryland's heritage. European involvement in Maryland began during the 17th century when English settlers sought to establish colonies along the Atlantic coast. In 1632, King Charles I granted a charter to Cecilius Calvert, also known as Lord Baltimore, authorizing the creation of the colony of Maryland. The colony was officially founded in 1634 when settlers arrived at St. Mary's City. Maryland was intended partly as a refuge for English Catholics facing religious persecution in Protestant England. This purpose distinguished Maryland from several neighboring colonies and shaped its early political and cultural identity. Religious tolerance became one of the defining themes of early Maryland history. Although conflicts between Catholics and Protestants still occurred, Maryland experimented with laws that promoted coexistence among Christian groups. The Maryland Toleration Act of 1649 represented one of the earliest attempts in colonial America to protect religious freedom for certain believers. This legacy later contributed to broader American ideas about freedom of religion and civil rights. The early economy of Maryland depended heavily on agriculture, especially tobacco cultivation. Fertile soil and access to waterways allowed plantation agriculture to expand rapidly. Tobacco exports generated wealth for landowners and connected Maryland to international trade networks. However, the success of plantation agriculture also increased dependence on labor systems that included indentured servants and enslaved Africans. Over time, slavery became deeply embedded in Maryland's society and economy, shaping social relationships and political debates for generations. The Chesapeake Bay played a central role in the development of Maryland. One of the largest estuaries in the world, the bay influenced settlement patterns, transportation, fishing industries, and cultural traditions. Communities along the bay relied on seafood industries involving oysters, crabs, and fish. The famous Maryland blue crab became one of the most recognizable symbols of the state. Maritime traditions developed throughout the region, connecting Maryland economically and culturally to Atlantic trade routes. As the colony expanded, towns and cities emerged as centers of trade and government. Annapolis eventually became the state capital and developed into an important colonial city known for its architecture and political significance. Annapolis later became home to the United States Naval Academy, reinforcing Maryland's long-standing connection to maritime activity and national defense. Another city that grew rapidly was Baltimore. Located around a major harbor, Baltimore developed into one of the most important ports in colonial America. Its strategic position encouraged trade, shipbuilding, and commerce. Over time, Baltimore became an industrial and cultural center whose influence extended far beyond Maryland itself. During the 18th century, Maryland became increasingly involved in political movements opposing British colonial policies. Colonists objected to taxation without representation and restrictions imposed by Britain. Maryland merchants, farmers, and political leaders joined protests and boycotts against British authority. Revolutionary ideas spread rapidly throughout the colony, encouraging support for independence. Maryland played an important role in the American Revolution. Soldiers from the state earned a reputation for courage and discipline during battles fought by the Continental Army under George Washington. Maryland troops became known as the Maryland Line, and their bravery contributed to the state's nickname, the Old Line State. Maryland delegates also participated actively in the Continental Congress and helped shape the emerging American government. Following independence, Maryland became one of the early states to ratify the United States Constitution in 1788. The state supported the creation of a stronger federal government and contributed land that later became part of the National Capital District surrounding Washington. This decision strengthened Maryland's long-term political importance because of its close relationship with the federal government. The 19th century transformed Maryland economically and socially. Improvements in transportation revolutionized commerce and communication. Roads, canals, and railroads connected Maryland more closely to national markets and encouraged industrial growth. The construction of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad represented a landmark achievement in American transportation history. It became one of the first major railroads in the country and established Baltimore as a key center of trade and manufacturing. Industrialization expanded rapidly during this period. Factories, steel mills, shipyards, and warehouses developed throughout Baltimore and surrounding regions. Immigration from Europe increased dramatically as workers arrived seeking economic opportunities. Irish, German, Italian, Polish, and Greek immigrants established neighborhoods, churches, schools, and businesses that contributed to Maryland's growing cultural diversity. At the same time, agriculture remained important in rural parts of the state. Tobacco farming continued in southern Maryland, while grain production became more significant in central and western areas. Maryland's economy therefore combined elements of both the industrial north and agricultural south. This dual identity influenced political tensions surrounding slavery and sectional conflict. The issue of slavery deeply divided Maryland society before the Civil War. Although Maryland was a slave state, it also contained strong abolitionist movements and large populations of free African Americans. Baltimore became a center for Black intellectual life, churches, and activism. One of the most influential figures associated with Maryland was Frederick Douglass, who escaped slavery in Maryland and became a leading voice against slavery worldwide. When the Civil War began in 1861, Maryland occupied a critical strategic position. The state surrounded the national capital on several sides, making its loyalty essential to the Union. President Abraham Lincoln took extraordinary measures to prevent Maryland from joining the Confederacy. Although the state officially remained loyal to the Union, many Maryland residents supported the South, while others fought for the Union. Families and communities were often divided by the conflict. The Civil War left lasting political and social effects on Maryland. Slavery was abolished, and African Americans sought opportunities for education, economic advancement, and political participation despite continuing discrimination. Black churches, schools, and civic organizations became important institutions within Maryland society. Baltimore in particular developed vibrant African American communities that contributed significantly to culture, business, and civil rights activism. Industrial growth accelerated after the Civil War. Baltimore became one of the nation's leading industrial cities, known for steel production, shipbuilding, rail transportation, and manufacturing. Immigration continued shaping the city's identity, adding layers of cultural diversity and urban development. Neighborhoods reflected ethnic traditions and community networks that influenced local politics and social life. Education emerged as another defining feature of Maryland's development. The founding of Johns Hopkins University in 1876 revolutionized higher education in America. The university emphasized scientific research and graduate study, setting new standards for academic excellence. Its medical school and hospital later became internationally respected for innovation and healthcare leadership. The 20th century brought further transformation to Maryland. During World War I and World War II, Maryland industries and military facilities contributed heavily to the national war effort. Shipyards and factories produced equipment, while military bases expanded throughout the state. Federal agencies and defense institutions also grew significantly during this period, increasing Maryland's importance in national security and government operations. Suburbanization changed Maryland dramatically after World War II. Communities surrounding Washington and Baltimore experienced rapid population growth as highways, housing developments, and economic opportunities expanded. Counties such as Montgomery and Prince George's became major suburban centers connected closely to federal employment and scientific research industries. The civil rights movement had a major impact on Maryland during the mid-20th century. African Americans organized campaigns challenging segregation and discrimination in schools, transportation, and public facilities. Community leaders and activists worked to expand voting rights, economic opportunity, and social equality. Although legal segregation ended, economic and racial inequalities remained important issues in many communities. Modern Maryland possesses one of the strongest economies in the United States. Government employment, biotechnology, healthcare, cybersecurity, education, and scientific research dominate economic activity. The state benefits enormously from its proximity to Washington and from institutions such as the National Institutes of Health and the National Security Agency. Cybersecurity has become especially important in recent decades. Maryland hosts numerous intelligence and defense agencies, encouraging private technology firms to develop advanced digital security systems. Universities and training programs support these industries by educating engineers, computer scientists, and cybersecurity professionals. Healthcare and medical research also remain central to Maryland's economy and identity. Johns Hopkins Hospital is recognized worldwide for excellence in patient care and scientific discovery. Medical institutions across the state contribute to advances in surgery, neuroscience, infectious disease research, and public health. Despite economic prosperity, Maryland still faces challenges involving inequality, urban poverty, housing, and crime. Baltimore demonstrates both the strengths and struggles of urban America. The city contains world-class institutions and vibrant cultural traditions, yet some neighborhoods continue experiencing economic hardship and social instability. Efforts to revitalize Baltimore include investments in education, public transportation, housing development, and community programs. Maryland's geography contributes greatly to its unique character. Eastern Maryland includes coastal plains, wetlands, and agricultural land surrounding the Chesapeake Bay. Seafood industries and tourism remain important there. Central Maryland contains major urban and suburban populations connected to Baltimore and Washington. Western Maryland, by contrast, features mountains, forests, and rural communities associated with the Appalachian region. This geographic diversity explains why Maryland is often called America in miniature. Within a relatively small state, one can find beaches, farmland, forests, industrial cities, and mountain landscapes. The climate also varies significantly, with humid coastal summers and colder mountain winters. Tourism plays an important role in Maryland's economy. Visitors explore historical landmarks, beaches, museums, mountain parks, and waterfront communities. Ocean City attracts millions of tourists every year with its beaches and boardwalk. Annapolis offers colonial architecture and maritime history, while Baltimore provides museums, sports venues, and cultural attractions. Sports occupy a major place in Maryland culture. Residents strongly support the Baltimore Ravens and the Baltimore Orioles. Horse racing also remains significant through the Preakness Stakes, one of the Triple Crown races in American horse racing. Maryland cuisine reflects the state's geography and cultural diversity. Seafood traditions dominate many local dishes, especially those involving blue crabs and oysters. Crab cakes became nationally famous symbols of Maryland cooking. Immigrant communities introduced additional culinary traditions that enriched the state's food culture. Cultural diversity continues shaping Maryland in the modern era. Immigration from Latin America, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East has expanded multicultural communities throughout the state. Festivals, religious institutions, and local businesses celebrate traditions from around the world while contributing to Maryland's economy and social life. Religion remains an important aspect of Maryland's society. Churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples serve as centers of worship, education, and community activity. Maryland's tradition of religious diversity dates back to the colonial era and continues influencing modern culture. Environmental protection has become one of Maryland's greatest priorities. Pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change threaten the Chesapeake Bay ecosystem. Conservation efforts aim to improve water quality, restore wetlands, and protect marine species. Rising sea levels and coastal flooding create additional concerns for communities along the Chesapeake Bay and Atlantic coast. Maryland's neighboring states also influence its identity and economy. To the north lies Pennsylvania, connected historically through trade and transportation. To the east, Delaware shares the Delmarva Peninsula with Maryland. To the south and west lies Virginia, linked closely through the Washington metropolitan area. Maryland also shares a border with West Virginia in the Appalachian region. The political culture of Maryland reflects its diversity and strategic position. Urban areas often support progressive policies, while rural regions may hold more conservative views. Debates involving healthcare, transportation, education, environmental regulation, and economic inequality remain central to public life. Education continues to be one of Maryland's greatest strengths. Public schools and universities consistently rank highly nationwide. Research institutions attract scholars and students internationally, contributing to innovation in science, medicine, engineering, and public policy. The arts flourish throughout Maryland as well. Baltimore is associated with literary figures such as Edgar Allan Poe, whose legacy remains closely tied to the city. Music, theater, and visual arts contribute to Maryland's cultural richness and community identity. Transportation infrastructure remains essential to Maryland's success. Ports, rail systems, airports, and highways connect the state to national and international markets. Baltimore's harbor remains one of the busiest ports in the country, supporting trade and commerce. Looking toward the future, Maryland faces both opportunities and challenges. Advances in science, medicine, and technology are likely to strengthen the economy further. Population growth and immigration will continue increasing cultural diversity and economic activity. However, housing affordability, transportation congestion, climate change, and inequality require careful planning and investment. Maryland's history demonstrates remarkable resilience and adaptability. From its origins as a colonial refuge for Catholics to its modern role as a center of scientific innovation and government activity, the state has repeatedly transformed itself while preserving its distinctive identity. Maryland stands as one of the most historically rich, economically important, and culturally diverse states in the United States. Its story reflects the broader history of America itself, including colonization, revolution, slavery, industrialization, immigration, civil rights struggles, and technological advancement. Maryland combines urban and rural traditions, northern and southern influences, historical preservation and scientific innovation. Its people, landscapes, and institutions continue shaping both the state and the nation. Maryland truly deserves its reputation as America in miniature. Within its borders exist many of the experiences, challenges, and achievements that define the United States as a whole. Through centuries of change, Maryland has remained a state of extraordinary significance, balancing tradition with progress and preserving a strong sense of identity amid constant transformation. Thank you for watching this video.